welcome back to the Asia Political Review. Today's topic is Indonesia, and there's a lot to cover here. If you have been watching events in Indonesia over the past year or so, you're probably going to be looking at a very stark picture because tens of thousands of Indonesians have been taking to the streets, particularly the middle class. And, this is not something that has escaped other countries. Bangladesh, Nepal, Thailand, several other places have had their share of street protests. India recently, as I talked about on a recent episode. And all that relates to a certain degree of public anger, a certain explosion of public anger. But I think Indonesia is unique because the middle class in Indonesia is shrinking. So for the years, the country, nearly 300 million people, was celebrated as rising economic power. But recent data, World Bank, some recent economic studies, reveal a major shift because fewer workers are earning middle-class livelihoods, particularly among young graduates. So educated youth are not getting into the traditional workforce. They are being pushed into the informal sector, or what you call the gig economy. And this uncertainty is predictable, right? People take to the streets when they're upset. This is common. But the state's response to these events has and should draw alarm because human rights groups have found that widespread crackdowns have occurred in the wake of the 2025 and 2026 protests. And this response also sits against a fundamental shift, I guess, inside the country, the re-expansion of the country's military into civilian life. So under the current president, Prabowo, the government has actively defended this expanding role, the role of the TNI, the Indonesian Armed Forces, in non-military sectors. And revisions to the TNI law have steadily chipped away at the firewall, so to speak, that was built after Suharto in 1998, the regime, the dictatorial regime. And that TNI law mandated civilian rule as a part of reforms. But today, not unlike other countries, military personnel and former military personnel are taking on civilian roles. Economic development, domestic security, civilian administration, and that quiet remilitarization. I think for academics like me, it's troubling. It's an erosion of democratic guardrails. But for the administration, I think it's framed differently. It's essential national resilience. But I wonder, and I will talk about this with my guest, what happens when the military footprint grows? Who's the government accountable to? Who is the military accountable to? The balance in civil-military relations. That's a big question. And it brings up another crucial question that gets often overlooked, which is foreign policy. So Jakarta has been seen, the foreign policy scene is kind of elite territory. Political elites dominate it. And you have this smooth, very non-aligned diplomacy that operates above the politics of daily life. But it's very, very difficult now, I think, to separate the global posture from the internal fractures. Because, hey, crackdowns and so are not befitting of a country that wants economic growth, wants to be seen as a democracy. So as these human rights concerns mount, that's concerning because the military's role is growing. And civil society wants to have a say in how the country projects itself globally and challenging the state to align its international grand narrative with democratic values back at home. So, how can you present yourself as a leader in ASEAN? How can you present yourself as a leader in the global south while you're grappling with these very, very sensitive issues, this military creep and both civil unrest? So, to help me unpack all of this craziness, I am pleased to welcome a special guest. His name, Dr. Aniello Iannone. He is a lecturer in Indonesian and Southeast Asian politics at the Department of Political Science and Government at Diponegoro University in Indonesia. His research focuses on international relations of Southeast Asia, comparative politics, Indonesian politics, and then the intersection of that and how its role, Indonesia's role, as an international actor, as a regional actor. So I think his insights will show us some, well, they'll be really revealing. So let me welcome my guest and I'll play this interview that I had with him over the weekend. But if you haven't already, this is my normal reminder. If you haven't liked the video or haven't subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to do so now. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in that section. So here's the video. I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome, Dr. Iannone. It's good to meet you officially, and thank you for being a part of this expert interview we have here on the Asia Political Review. And your expertise is obviously in Indonesian politics, foreign policy, diplomacy, and there have been a lot of events going on recently, some of which I've talked about in my opening. And the most serious, I think, is the series of protests that have gone on starting in late 2025 and they continue into now. And I'm just looking for additional context. Can you walk us through what has driven the last wave of protests? I was talking about it in my opening. It's interesting that the middle class is now taking to the streets. So is this something that feels like a continuation of what we saw in 2025, or has something really shifted? Has something really changed? What do you think?
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you to discuss this important issue, I guess, about Indonesian
Yeah.
politics. Well, let's start to make a point. Protest in Indonesia is very important because all through the history of Indonesia, they have a major role for the shape the politics. Think about after the 65, 98, during all the Reformation protests. So protests have a major role. And if you see let's call it the post-Reformation, post-Reformative period where we have Jokowi, after that we have Prabowo, all these periods, especially the second part of Jokowi, are full of protests. Especially for the first part of second period of Jokowi, we have protests against draconian law. So in particular, the penal, the revision of a criminal crime law, the omnibus law that was a major issue about labor rights, deforestation, etc. After
Right.
that, we have a kind of stop in terms of protest, and we have the election where we have the roast of Prabowo, and we have in the very short time a lot of protests
Yeah.
during Prabowo. We have the first protest against the reformation of the electional parliament law. There was not too much on the news that was important. And after that, we have another protest. But the first very important protest, but actually the politics, the elite start to think that something's going on the crossroads was actually 2025 when
Mm.
there was a very process of let's say indignation against some politics because the the government of Prabowo is the biggest in the history in Indonesia. So if you make a calculation how much parliament you have, we have the double of Jokowi. So a lot of people, so a lot of money spent for salary, of course, and a lot of the people are not actually politics. They were TikTokers or someone else. So they made a funny video about the youth salary. There was a problem for the Indonesia normal people that actually are struggle in poverty,
Right.
precarity. Maybe we can speak later about that, how actually it's influenced also the precarity level in Indonesia. So there was this huge protest. In the same time, when during the protest, as you know, one online Gojek or sorry, was the name in is Ojol, was murdered by a police by accident, but if voluntary is until now is unclear. And it was the first time then the protest escalated in mass level. So it was the biggest one after 98 in all Indonesia. I mean, also in Sulawesi, there was fire everywhere, but it was in that specific moment. And yeah, it took several weeks with repression and some kind of security level by the police, and also the deal between police and military. The protest now is quite different. So after that protest, when we spoke about of course about the author killed by the police, so all the movie all the movie organized to protest. After that, we had the protest. The last one that was regarding more or less of the economic situation. One, the basic one that all newspapers speak about is the rise of the petrol, so the benzene. So, but petrol in Indonesia is quite need to be understand into level, in my opinion. So, if you speak about petrol, normal people go to drive, yes, rise a little, but the problem was the 32% of biodiesel, so the petrol used for truck. So actually, if the truck high level of petrol, automatically also
Gotcha.
all your use like a food, transportation rose. The
Right.
second, this was the first one. The second one was actually the Rupiah is at a slow level of history of Indonesia after 1998. If you think about now, $1 is more or less 18, 19, depends of the
Right.
day. It's a disaster. It's
Right.
also against the propaganda that the Prabowo have made during the propaganda period. And the first one was very important, and it's actually under view is the reformation of two important laws. One, the reformation of military law, and the one, the reformation of police. So
Right.
both now make a very important decision. They shift the rule of the police and they shift the
Yeah.
rule of military. So this is
Yeah.
actually the trajectory, if you think historically, why we have this protest now. And in New Day, oh, there's also the new one about the LGBT also, the new protest again.
That's you end on a very important note because in my opening I was talking about the creep or maybe even the return of the military into administrative, political, and sort of governmental areas. The boundary between civil military relations is moving once again towards the military. So there's this old policy, Dui Feng say, is that the right lens to use? Is this historical comparison accurate, or is it more rhetoric? Or what's concretely really different about civil military relations now versus it was in the post, what, 1998 reform era? What do you think?
Well, if you think about 1998, the dual function that was made up by Suharto was
Right,
a narrative ideology that worked in that other period. So was create ad hoc for that kind of situation where you have a kind of hegemony from the elite, based by military oligarchy to down. So
right,
complete with the repression, military rule very important. They share some kind of also business to business. But
sure,
if you think is the good lens to understand Indonesia, it depends. If you think
yeah,
when the dua fungsi was actually stopped, It's just 20 years ago. If you think about when the first rule to stop the rule of military in civil apparatus just stopped 2004 to be SBA. And also the normative the SBA was created do not delay the dua fungsi. They just slow down the process. If you
Right.
think so, until now, the military still have a major role in Indonesia politics, even not like in 1998, but they have concretely the hands in the Indonesian politics. So what's happened with Prabowo with the reformation of the new dua fungsi actually is a militarization of the politics in Indonesia. Not like Suharto directly, but more on project. So you have a
Yeah.
lot of party projects, very huge, we spend a lot of money. We're now under control of military. For example, the food estate in Papua is militarized by military, the MBG. So you think about the free meal program food is under also the military. So who organized is the military. The process of extraction of nickel is all in this project. The militarization of Indonesia through the military. The military have military rule, but also as part of a civic part of the society. So these are
Sure.
return, but not the same way how it was to in 1998. Because historically, also you don't have the same situation. You don't have also the same enemy. If you think about the
Yeah.
1998 was still the ghost of communists. Now you don't have the ghost of communists.
Yeah.
So the process change, but the target is the same.
Yeah. But it's often that people have nothing to compare it to but the past. So these things that may not be actually comparative end up being compared today. So I think that for you to distinguish between the two was really, really important because it separates really what was this post 1998 reform era to now, and they're largely two different things. But I want to shift gears once again because I'm really looking to talk about a kind of a hodgepodge of topics here. So we're, I don't know, 20 or so months into Prabowo's new his term, and foreign policy is a big issue. And I'm wondering another of these terms, bebas active.
Mm.
That expression just means kind of like for the layman, free and active or independent and free. Do you think this kind of a philosophy is guiding decision making, or is this just a kind of label that's being applied after what's already been decided? So, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, that kind of a thing. What do you think?
Well, I think the term representative was used very often during Prabowo period, but you think about representative, the term born with Prabowo is the history of diplomacy of Indonesia was to create a lot of this by Soekarno-Hatta during the
Yeah,
Reformation protest. It was used also by Sukarno, of course, Suharto, and all the president until now. But the problem of Prabowo now is in terms of free, it's very free in terms of doing foreign policy. Active, I don't know, it's active, it depends what we mean by active. It's
yeah,
active, it's doing around people, it's active, but concretely until now, it's more a narrative for a justification to domestic foreign policy. Why? If you
sure.
think Prabowo, think about the figure of Prabowo. Prabowo was, for until now, in the position, or sometimes in the state government, always in the position part, never in the ruling part. And always mixed propaganda. So it was very performative to do something in terms of security, domestic one, foreign one, or about some enemy to fight. No. So when he won the election, and he concretely he mean to speak about foreign policy, what he do was actually to do action. So
Mm.
be part of the BRICS, in the same time be part of the Board of Peace by Trump, the same time speak with Russia, go to the China for the first flight. So very actively, but I don't know concretely what actually is how he do in terms of foreign policy. It is the first difference between Jokowi and Prabowo. Jokowi was very non-interested in foreign policy, was
Yeah, very
so
much in domestic politics, sure.
yeah, was most policy. If you know the name of Jokowi in Indonesia is the father of development because he focused on development. And all the foreign policy was delayed to Retno at the time. Prabowo is different. Prabowo is a guy that want to have the control. So everything need to go through Prabowo, even foreign policy. Even Sugiono Santai don't know if he do something or not without Prabowo. Think
Yeah,
about how many times he went to Russia and the same time fly to France. So in just 3 days, he went in different countries.
yeah,
So actively, yes, but for what? For a justification in domestic politics. Why I'm doing this? Because there is an emergency. I speak with Putin because we have energy crisis. I speak with France because we need to buy security material in case of war. I speak with Trump because in the US we cannot speak with the US. And why we speak with China? Yeah, because he's the first export partner, so we need to speak with China. Every time we speak with China, every time we speak with one major actor, there's always a justification in domestic one
yeah.
even of ASEAN sometimes. Even sometimes you need to make a deal with ASEAN. I think Prabowo is not really interested in ASEAN politics compared to Jokowi. Think about, for example, he did also went to the ASEAN meeting in Kansas. So it's more of performative one, especially if you need to speak with the major actor.
Mm,
If there's Indonesia as Indonesia actor, of course.
I got you. I understand. All right. It leads me to another point, and I'm just curious. So when I listen to you, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's this? How is this different from political pragmatism? But then I was thinking, um, I read this piece recently in the Jakarta Post, arguing that he is quote unquote captivated by the theater of diplomacy, and the article warns that hey, the decision making is really running by or running through one man rather than the sort of the spine or so of the diplomatic corps. And I'm just wondering about the theater metaphor. Is this how much of this is substance wearing a costume, or how much do you think the costume is the actual substance? And where do you draw the line between this idea of formative diplomacy? Or
Well,
is this just, or is this sort of, I know that I'm torturing this for a bit, but, or is this simply diplomacy that happens to photograph? Well, the optics are great. What do you think?
because I think the only way to explain this, I mean, in terms of theater, yes. I mean, in some aspect, it's very theater. In foreign policy, it's some kind of theater. But the problem is to understand which actor actually do the major player. So, I in some perspective, it's intense because what actually Prabowo is doing in foreign policy in terms of performative, if you will, is actually doing propaganda. So it's still continuing to do propaganda as he was the opposition one, but now is a president. So it's the same kind of dialogue, same kind
Is
of
there a
speech.
distinction between when you say the word propaganda, or is this just simply another word for political messaging?
No, I mean propaganda in terms to justification. I mean narrative.
Okay, so yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, for
okay,
example, if you saw like for example, a kind of leader, if actually no problem, what they do is to speak in a perspective that works if you are in the opposition, but if they you are doing a ruling party, it doesn't work anymore. So Prabowo is still doing the same way, but now it's a president.
yeah,
So
okay. I
for this,
understand.
some authors say it's performative, it's theater. Yes, it's like this.
Okay.
For this, that doesn't work until now. And for this now, actually, why actually she was more focused on foreign policy is another question. Why we have this shift between Prabowo and Choko? Why Prabowo is focused much more on this performative foreign policy compared to Prabowo is because one is a general. So
Yeah,
in terms of it's a perspective to speak in the perspective. The second word
yeah,
in the general one is to put Indonesia as the one big actor can compare with actor. This was the very first part
Yeah.
or the purple exchange until now because internal pressure again. You're gonna see
Yeah.
in the future next year probably foreign policy will become non important, not too much compared to the domestic one because we are going to prepare for the election. So
Right.
Prabowo will focus on the election.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting because um, maybe this idea of performative diplomacy, or at least his idea of the theater of diplomacy, it really comes also from a shift in the stature of his predecessor being more focused on domestic policy, and then the transition to a general and focus on foreign policy. Just the nature of it, the elevation, of Prabowo as a statesman makes this feel performative.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, in some time when also I heard speaking in some perspective is the same. There was a period during it was accused, to do too much, travel a lot
yeah,
abroad, but at the same time he was stopping other people to go abroad.
yeah,
So because it was no, we don't need foreigners, we don't need foreigners because it's always some kind of justification that he need to put on the table for when in the domestic one.
yeah,
It's again why am I going to why I'm flying to Russia because I need to speak with Putin because Putin is our best friend in case
yeah,
the street
yeah.
of
I
us is
know.
closed. So, but the same way
Great
I don't
guy.
want. Yeah, but the same way I don't want too much Russia in my country, or other way I don't want a lecturer or professor for the country to speak about issue on politics in Indonesia because it might be kind of spy. So this kind of joking with historical issue about
Right. Of course.
enemy for the country, but the same way
Yeah, yeah.
and with this is very performative.
Interesting.
Again, freely. Actively, yes, but actively to do
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
And
Interesting.
but
So,
think about
no, very, 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 very good answer. Very succinct, actually. So I have one sort of my big final question. And we've talked about a lot of different things, but there's the the domestic pressures. So, Indonesia economy, because of the recent war in Iran, right? That has put a lot of pressure on a lot of people. And there's also the foreign pressures. So, as you saw, a lot of ASEAN leaders in Kazan,
mm,
and you wrote a piece about this recently, I read, where there's a lot of pressure by ASEAN officials to move towards diversification of oil and gas and energy supply chains. So, really, what I'm really saying here is that the domestic and the foreign policy pressures are really one and the same. They're connected, and this is the same thing you're kind of arguing. So, what do we expect next from the president or the country in general? Does Prabowo under strain at home, does he lean harder into the international spotlight to compensate? Or has what we've seen in Kazan, where he wasn't there and it was the foreign minister, has this become a new pattern uh, for the country? What do you think?
personally, I think we're going to same way of Kazan. I mean, we're going to see less Prabhu doing foreign policy
Yeah, yeah.
actively as was before. One, because I already tell you, because we are going to start the campaign for the election.
Okay.
And
See,
now
that's good.
Prabhu in domestic is completely going down because the free meal program is consume a lot of resource. It don't create nothing. So
Yeah.
it's create a lot of problem internally. People that don't have job, don't have high level of precarity, people that have
Right.
like skill, don't work.
Right.
It's a problem. So the big deal will be in domestic one, in economic one. So I'm pretty sure that the Pabo will focus on that one. The second one, he was accused a lot to do too much, to spend a lot abroad. So compared to spend money to the countries, always are
Right.
every day on the newspaper. So we're gonna see less activity, more to more Sugiono go to event compared to Prabowo. Prabowo, I think we speak less also on foreign policy, more speak more on domestic one. I think this is the way. The second one about more domestic politics connected to the internal, yes, but the problem on Indonesia is that if you make a deal with too much people, you lose you lose your integrity. I mean, you cannot be friends with everyone, especially if you speak with China and the US and then with Russia. I mean, the kind of deal that you can and make a deal with everything without the consequence. One day, one major power call you and say yes, or me or there. One day we can for sure. I mean, you are Indonesia, one of the biggest countries in Southeast Asia, so you can still you can make part of BRICS, but the day you become part of BRICS, you make a step back to the your foreign policy of free article because
Yeah.
BRICS is one ideology, one policy, one view of the world, one agglomeration country that is not the West.
Right.
So
Sounds like it
Russia.
sounds like something that is befuddles a lot of middle powers.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and this kind of can be the problem in case escalation or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna be problematic in the future. But for me, we're gonna be more like in the way of Kazan. So less about spotting on foreign policy, more on domestic. But there's no way. I mean, because he already said he want to run for the election 2029. So we started next year for the preparation, and probably we'll focus on propaganda and again, also
Yeah.
for make sure that the his plan works. So yeah, we're gonna see this kind of page.
It's interesting. So, no, covered a lot of topics, but just one last question, and it's just sort of like an impromptu kind of a thing. But we're now into the end of July, 7 months into the year. What can we expect from Indonesia? What are the issues to look for on the last half of the year, and then going into 2027? What are the hot button issues? Do they stay the same? Or something we can look not forward to, but something we can anticipate?
Well, I think before the finish of the year, probably in we will see a new reformation on the police community because they now, I mean, there is kind of war of money in terms of
Mm.
taxation on Indonesia now. So we are kind of process to make a new reformation where not just the tax guy can check your balance, but also the police and military. So now we're gonna see the kind of process, and this make me think about two things. One, they're looking for resource. They're looking for to take the resource for the people,
Yeah.
and we are going to make. I mean, still kind of known and the Minister of Finance and Economy still don't have any kind of clue how to rise the rupiah value.
Yeah.
So until now, it's still going down, 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 and it's probably because in this kind of economy, when believe me, we have a lot of precariety in Indonesia. Very compare maybe to the other ASEAN country. Indonesia is, I think, one of the worst in terms of precariety and generation where they have a job. The level of employee people, young people, is lost every year. So I think what Indonesia should do and what I expect probably he will not do is to make a kind of policy to kind of shut down, kind of shoot at least for make some kind of deal with the civil society because you see more people don't get job, more people don't
Yeah.
eat, more protests you have. This is
It's
gonna be
it's
the
it's
first one.
interesting. Yeah, interesting you say that because I know that Indonesia, Thailand, and even parts of China, there's a heavy problem with graduate
Mm.
unemployment, and there's this unexpected economic shock that comes with that, and they end up in the kind of gig economy where they
Yeah,
end up as delivery drivers, and in China, of course, they're simply overextended, and during the oil and gas price explosion, their budgets were constrained. Fuel prices went up, so they're working very, very hard for very, very little money. And down the road, looking forward, there's not a lot of economic opportunity for them. And
Well,
in large countries, Indonesia is a country of over what, 300 million people?
almost.
Yeah, almost exactly. That's a tough problem to have, and it's not
It's a global
an
problem,
old
and this is the
country. Yeah,
consequence of the Prabowo policy. The
yeah,
fact that he spent this a lot of money for this free meal program for Israel to create opportunity for invest in doctoral proper talking about hospitality,
yeah,
hospital
yeah,
housing. He spent a lot for this kind of free meal that you cannot reduce with free meal poverty. It's I mean, if you open any kind of a poverty analysis book, it's kind of, well, you cannot reduce poverty with just free meal. You can have a proper program in the long term. But the problem is this. Regarding to your point, very good about the people that go economy. In Indonesia, we have people that have PhD than doing this kind of job. There was now a case in constitutional court where we have people that have degrees in US, in Australia. They are lecturer, but because it's not enough, they do like driver taxing.
yeah,
It's a work, of course. But if you have a PhD, so you have high qualification job,
yeah,
you need to work for your country to develop a country.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a kind of waste of
Yeah, I
time
know
and
it's
everything, investment.
but the stakes are quite high. I mean, we're not just talking about people with PhDs. There's an old cocktail party joke, so to speak, in the United States. Oh, I got a PhD, but I work at a supermarket or a Safeway,
Yeah,
and it's kind of a joke. Ha ha. How many unemployed literature, PhDs or humanities PhDs are there? But that's not anything to laugh at. We're not talking about an academic job market. We're talking about people who are looking for economic opportunity anywhere they can find it. Yeah,
yeah, it's the same. I mean,
it's a
it's
very, very
very hard.
serious problem in a country that's really a middle income country.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
because the education compared to the European is very expensive, and not everyone can afford actually.
exactly.
So
Exactly. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So it was really, really nice to meet you, to talk with you on a variety of subjects. And Southeast Asia is my wheelhouse. And what's interesting is because I don't get to talk about Indonesia very often. I often myself write about Indonesia in the context of ASEAN or in the context of the Myanmar crisis. And to have someone to talk about just Indonesian politics is quite a treat for me. And I really appreciate you joining me on this fledgling YouTube channel to share your expertise and your insights. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
it's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. I hope it was all clear.
It was great. It was great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.